What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we're chatting with Ben Beecken of Locked On Wolves as Karl Anthony-Towns, Anthony Edwards, and DeAngelo Russell are solidifying the Wolves' playoff chances this season. Can they fight their way out of the Western Conference play-in territory? What exactly has changed between last season and this season for the Wolves? We're going to get there in just a moment after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline, because look, football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach will wind up landing, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And hey, it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, where the game starts. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Wolves, Ben Beecken, who you can follow on Twitter at BBeacon. Ben, the Wolves are good. Can I cautiously say that this season?
I think we could say they're good. Yeah, it just let's leave it at that. Let's just leave it as good. Yeah.
Right. We don't want to jinx it. You know, the floor hasn't fallen out from underneath them. There's still 1/3 of the season left to go, but they're 13-7 over their last 20 games. They're comfortably at the top of the play-in pecking order right now, vying for, potentially a solidified playoff spot, fighting for potentially a 5th or 6th seed, creeping up on the Denver Nuggets ever so slowly. What has been the biggest, reason for the sustained success for the T-Wolves this season?
Yeah, I think the craziest thing is that the roster is essentially the same as last year, and a lot of people don't realize that. There's actually, you look at the roster, the top 12 guys in terms of minutes, 10 of them were on the team last year. So you're looking at Patrick Beverley, who's obviously made a big impact, but him and Taurean Prince is the only guys that are different. So the question is obviously what's changed. Well, I think the biggest thing, number one, is coaching. Chris Finch is, I think, going to start to get a little bit more of his due as a really good coach, and I think that that's probably the biggest thing, putting players in better positions to succeed. He's definitely been an upgrade over Ryan Saunders, and both offensively and defensively, schematically, they're far better this year than they have been in recent years. The second thing is, and this is related to coaching, is natural player development and improvement. I mean, guys like Karl Anthony-Towns, he's always been good, and offensively, he's not really all that different than what he's been in the past, but he's much better defensively. They put him in a better spot in their primary defensive scheme. Then Anthony Edwards, I mean, he was 19 last year. He's much improved this year, a much better player. He's had some struggles of late. I think he's a little banged up, some injury issues, but he's been much improved. And then the last thing would be, and this is I think this is very real. I think we have to mention it, is health. I mean, last year, DeAngelo Russell and Karl Anthony-Towns played in less than 20 games together. In the games that they played together, the Wolves were over 500. D'Lo's missed some time with some nagging injuries here and there, but has, for the most part, been healthy. And he and Towns and Edwards have been on the court together a bunch more this year. And that's maybe I mean, along with the coaching side of things, the biggest difference.
Do you see Chris Finch finishing somewhere at maybe not necessarily a front runner for Coach of the Year, but do you think he should be at least in the conversation and maybe a finalist for the award this year, depending on where we find the Wolves, finishing the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think he'll get votes as long as they at least make the plan. But if they finish in the top 6, if they can somehow, and they're now, I think, 3 back of Denver for the 6th spot, if they can somehow find their way into the top 6, I think he's going to be probably a top 3 finalist for Coach of the Year. I don't see, again, with virtually the same roster, and he'd be the first to say that he's been blessed with a little bit more health than his predecessor had in terms of the team's best players. But this team's just improved all the way around, and you have to credit Finch for a lot of that.
Now, depending on who you ask, and I say this just, to with a little caveat in there that I believe Karl Anthony-Towns is the 3rd best big in the NBA, but depending on who you ask, you may have some say Rudy Gobert is number 3. So let me ask you this, Ben. If, first off, do you think Karl Anthony-Towns is the 3rd best big in the NBA? If he's not, what does he have to do to surpass Rudy Gobert to be there? And if he is the 3rd best big in the NBA, how big is the gap between him and Jokic and Embiid, whoever you want to put at 1-2, because those are clearly the 1-2 in the NBA? How big is that gap between those guys, and can he overcome that gap, and what does he need to do to get on the same level as those two guys just mentioned?
Yeah, I think he's definitely the third best big. I think he just does so much more offensively, obviously, than Rudy Gobert. And everyone knows how Rudy impacts the game defensively. But Towns is now starting to impact the game defensively, and he's much improved. He's bought in on that end of the floor, and that to me is the biggest thing. I mean, I don't know what more he could do offensively. I mean, he's already a 50-40. 83 guy. I mean, I guess he could be 50-40-90. We could talk about that then. He needs to, and this goes along with his defense. He needs to improve his he needs to get better at not committing fouls on both ends of the floor. He has the highest percentage of offensive fouls committed of any player in the NBA, and that was true last year too. So if he's always up there in terms of personal fouls, and it's something crazy, like a third of his fouls are offensive fouls. And he's improved over the last few weeks, and that's part of the reason the Wolves are winning, honestly, because it's helped trim back turnovers. But if he can control himself, not get super emotional when things don't go his way in the officiating, in the realm of officiating, and then along with that, continue to improve defensively. Like offensively, he's bought into the scheme. The Wolves have moved him around a lot this year to try and avoid getting him double teamed in the post a bunch. They've used him on the perimeter more. They've used him in the middle of the floor a lot more. Things that Chris Finch did when he was in Denver several years ago with Jokic as an assistant. And I don't know what more he could do offensively. Maybe the assist number can come up a little bit. The turnovers could come down, but it always comes back to staying on the floor with foul trouble, and not committing those extra 2 turnovers a game offensively because of, getting out of control, and some of the issues that he has. So if he could just kind of reel that in a little bit, then I think he's right there in the conversation with Embiid for number 2.
All right. All right. I like it. I like it. Now, Ben, I know you just mentioned, the recent struggles as of late for Anthony Edwards, but in your eyes, for this Timberwolves team, who is more important, who's more crucial to the success of this team on a nightly basis in any given game? Is it Anthony Edwards or is it DeAngelo Russell? I know they're both very important, but who kind of has the edge? Who's more the X factor for the success of this team?
It's an interesting question because everybody talks about the numbers. The Timberwolves are much better when D'Lo's on the court, and I think all things considered, he's probably a better player all the way around than Anthony Edwards. He's just a little more consistent. However, I would still, I think, go with Anthony Edwards, and I think it's because the gap between his floor and ceiling is so high on a night-to-night basis. I mean, he's been much better this year than last year. He was a borderline all-star as it is, and so is D'Angelo Russell. But like the last couple weeks, Anthony Edwards has scored in single digits. I think 4 out of the last 5 games before last night. So I guess 4 out of the last 6 games. He had never scored in single digits in 3 straight games in his whole career last year, this year, and that happened recently. And the Timberwolves there's an extra layer of their offense is so much more dynamic, I guess, when he is playing extremely well. And D'Lo, you kind of know what you're going to get. He has his off shooting nights, but he's consistent. There's some nights where he's not as good defensively, but really with Anthony Edwards, if he's invisible, then you lack that. I mean, D'Lo does what he does. He'll score 18, 19 points. He'll shoot a bunch of threes in transition. He'll create for others, but Anthony Edwards is either invisible, and missing, taking ill-advised 3-point, step backs when he should be getting to the rim, or he's unstoppable and he's scoring 35. And I think that if he lands somewhere on the high end, like he did for the last 2 months of last season and for a good chunk of the first part of this season, then this team's offense becomes from pedestrian to like a easy top 10 offense. And D'Lo is a little more consistent than Edwards. And I think that's probably the biggest difference, is because, and Edwards is truly like a guy who can score at all 3 levels. And D'Lo is kind of limited to the perimeter and the mid-range game. He doesn't get to the basket a whole lot, but when Ant is on his game, he's scoring at all 3 levels. He's getting to the free throw line and he's adding that element that otherwise the Wolves offense lacks.
No, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but can you see over this final 1/3 of the season, based on their remaining schedule and whatnot, can you see the Timberwolves kind of separating themselves from the rest of the West play-in pack? And, do you have a prediction in mind for where you ultimately see this team kind of falling into the playoff pecking order?
Yeah, I think the most likely outcome is that they stay at 7th. They're a couple games up on the Clippers, and obviously the Clippers have their injury issues that they're dealing with, and they're now, I think, 3 or 3.5 behind Denver for number 6. They have one more game against Denver. They have the shot at winning the tiebreaker against Denver. We talked on our Western Conference roundtable last week for the play-in teams about the possibility of Denver getting to 5, the Wolves getting to 6, and the Mavs falling to 7 just because of their upheaval at the trade deadline and trading Porzingis, and just kind of a weird team at this point in the season. And I think the most likely scenario is the Timberwolves are solidly at 7th. And I think everybody would feel pretty good about that coming into the season. I thought they'd finish in 8th or 9th. 7th is nice. But I would say that their next most likely scenario is getting up to 6. And I don't know if it's Denver. falling out, if they struggle to reintegrate Jamal Murray when he comes back, or if it's Dallas that kind of falls apart and falls into the play-in range. But I would say that there's definitely a shot. I'd probably put it at like a 60 to 70% chance they stay at 7, and then the rest of it would be, I think they get up to 6. I think that's definitely a possibility.
Okay. And the last thing here for you, Ben, what's the latest on Malik Beasley? Any concern on that front? Is it just day to day? Any major, cause for concern with him?
Yeah, he played Friday, and then Saturday he he played Thursday, and then he missed Friday's game, the second night of a back-to-back with a non-COVID illness. Hasn't been much said since then, so it seems like it was kind of something that cropped up on Friday, and then they had the weekend off, so they don't play again until Monday. They've got this weird, like, back-to-back, 2 days off, back-to-back, 2 days off, back-to-back, so their first 6 games are part of back-to-backs out of the break. So I'd imagine he's back playing early next week. We haven't heard anything otherwise.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Ben. You're going to keep us locked on everything Wolves over at Locked On Wolves. Thanks for jumping on Locked On NBA with me.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jackson.